Very welcome, everybody. It's really an amazing turnout. I understand that there are more people following online. So this event is really becoming a very well-known, a tradition, a well-known annual event, the launch of the EPF Contraception Policy Atlas Europe. So today I'm chairing together with my colleague Fred Matic, who will address a few words to you in a minute. But first, by way of introduction, this is the 6th edition of the Contraception Policy Atlas Europe. And so we have been having this event since 2017. And the interesting thing is not just the facts which are presented, but also the trends that can be observed as you are doing this exercise for a number of years now. We are close to Valentine's Day, as some of you may be aware of. So this is a very good time of the year to not just give flowers to each other and secret love messages and so on, but also to discuss women's empowerment, sexual pleasure and autonomy and bodily autonomy. You may wish to do something on social media. You may have seen that outside the meeting room, there's a kind of stand where you can take your own picture. There are hashtags for social media, so don't hold back. I would also like to welcome any colleague MEPs who are not just here on the podium, but either in the room or following online. And we're also very pleased to have with us as guests today Mrs. Lina Lopez, who is sitting opposite me. Enjoy your salad. A member of Parliament from Portugal, and who is on the EPF Executive Committee. And we also say hello to the rest of the Executive Committee who are following us online, I believe, I hope. And we also have here with us today two representatives of Organon, long-term supporter of the research project, Mr. Van Hoeken and Mr. Wojciechowski. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Thank you very much. Okay, so this session will last for approximately 1 hour, but we have the meeting room until 2 o'clock, so there's a kind of after party where you can have snacks and drinks and a friendly chat with all the interesting people in the room. And in the course of the debate, we will also take some questions from the people who are watching online. So now I'm first going to give the floor to Fred Matic.
Thank you, Sophie. Dear all, welcome to the presentation of the 2023 Contraception Atlas. Thank you all for coming today, and thanks also to Sophie and the EPF team for co-organizing this event with us. As you know, the issue of SRHR and contraception have been very high on my agenda since I started this mandate. In my resolution on sexual and reproductive health and rights, contraception was one of the key areas we work and advocate for. And alongside Sophie, through our group MEPs for SRHR, we are trying to keep it in the focus in the Parliament. The issue of access to contraception goes far beyond the contraceptive supplies, counseling and information, and it is a crucial public health issue today. The Atlas represents a very valuable tool for the parliamentarians and give us the evidence we need to advocate for full access to contraception across all member states, but also in relation to third countries. I'm looking forward to hearing our experts present this year's findings and taking them with us forward in our work, and we have done previous years. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we owe you an applause, not just for your introductory remarks, but also for steering through Parliament a historic report on sexual and reproductive health and rights, the Matic report. That was the best one ever, so I'm very proud to be working with you, because we all know that contraception and family planning is not a technical matter. It is a matter of equality. It is a matter of having equal chances and opportunity in life. And I think that, as we're going to see later on today, that let's say the economic inequality map of Europe is also the same map as unequal access to contraceptives and family planning. So the two go hand in hand, and it's also very evident that that is simply a matter of political choices. And it's not like, it's not like the weather, something that's happening to us. It is all a matter of policy. And in this sense, I think that the Atlas this year is especially important as we see that public attitudes are changing. And I note that also among young people, there are more and more conservative attitudes about these matters, about gender equality, about sexual and reproductive health and rights. So it's very, very important that we say it out loud, that we present the facts, and that we also reach out to young people, women in particular, who are living in countries where their governments are not looking after their interests. And I think, and I'll conclude on this, I often hear the argument, yes, but sexual and reproductive health and rights is a purely national matter, a matter of national competence. That, friends, is not true. We do not have, as a European Union, a kind of exclusive common European competence. That is absolutely true. But sexual and reproductive health and rights are very firmly part and parcel of public health policies anywhere. So I don't see why the European public health policy can deal with Alzheimer or obesitas or cancer and not with sexual and reproductive health and rights, which concerns everybody. So let's not accept this argument that this is not a European matter. Equality is very much a European matter. Well-being of everybody is very much a European matter. Gender equality is a European matter. And equal access to health is maybe one of the ultimate European matters. So that's what I would like to share with us. Then we're going to move to quiz time. Yes, we're not only going to have a political debate, but we're going to test your knowledge of contraception. And I would like to give the floor to Leonidas Galeridis from EPF, and he's going to take us through the quiz.
Hello, can you hear me? Perfect. So you can use your data or a Wi-Fi. You can see now Wi-Fi codes of the day. Just a minute. So yeah, you can see the Wi-Fi. Username is it's not very clearly. It's visit 0208. And the password is, now it's better. The password is 3F2KU. But you can also use your data. And after, I invite you, both people who are in person and people who are watching us online, to go to the website www.menti.com. And as soon as you go there, you can put the code that you can see also in the streaming page online. It's 4859 0789.
Maybe repeat that once.
Yes, I will repeat that. Yeah. So it's 4859 0789. Yeah, you can put. Yeah. Okay. So, So yeah, you can see here again the codes and the website. We can wait some seconds more. And after we can start a very short quiz to test your knowledge of contraception. Yeah, the code, you can also watch it there. on your screen. It's 48590789. So
It's more a test of our IT skills than a test of contraceptives, really.
So yeah, we can start with the first question. So just for your information, it also matters the speed. So the quickest you are, the more points you get. So you have to be quick and correct. So we'll see the first question in a few seconds. What is the estimated proportion of unintended pregnancies in Europe? So it's 12%, 27%, or 36%. So correct answer is 36%. Well, a little less than half of the people found it. Second question. Which of the below contraceptive methods is the most reliable according to WHO? Male condoms, implant, or the pill? 5 seconds to go. 3, 2, 1. And the correct answer is the implant. A lot of you found it. Go to the third question. What is the most used form of contraception in Europe according to UN? The pill, male condom, or the implant? It's from the Department of Economic and Social Affairs. This study. The correct answer is the pill. Just for your information, this study includes. This study includes Europe and North America. There was no survey that was only for Europe. And we go to the fourth question. Young people from countries with good contraceptive policies mostly use LARC, permanent methods, or fertility awareness methods. The LARC is long-active reversible contraceptive. And that was based on a study that you can find also here, the TPF did. And the correct answer is LARC, as most of you found it. And the last question. How many governments provide comprehensive and detailed websites on contraception? Only 3, only 6, or only 12? It's out of 46. It's countries that our atlas evaluates. The correct answer is 6. And now we will see who is the winner. So we have Martin Galotto, Valentina Manchanti, and Nico, the winners. Is there anybody here among us?
Bravo, Martin.
Yeah. Congratulations to the 3 first. If you are not in the room, you are? Yeah. Yes, so we have a little gift from you. I invite Honorable Fred Matic and Sophie to give you a present from us. Okay.
Do you want to give that?
Wait, just a minute. Can I?
Like 2 seconds.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Just one more. So for the two more winners, please send us to our email address, your postal address, and we'll send you some gifts from the part of EPF. Thank you very much for participating.
Thank you very much, and thanks for doing this quiz. That's brilliant. I have to say, I was a little bit surprised with the reply or the percentage of people thinking that the male condom was the most used. Okay, now finally we're coming to the core topic of today, and that is the actual presentation of this year's contraception policy atlas. So Neil Data doesn't require an introduction. He's been at the heart of this for many years, and he is probably the most knowledgeable person on this continent and the driving force behind the Contraception Policy Atlas and many more brilliant initiatives. So, Neil, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you for such a lovely introduction, Sophie. It's a pleasure to be here with you and to present to you the 6th edition of the Contraception Policy Atlas. It was also great to see the questionnaire and the answers to it, because I think even though here we're dealing with a rather sophisticated audience in terms of knowledge about contraception, it looks like there's still a bit of awareness raising that we can all do, and even I have to say, even I found some of the questions a little bit tough. So with that, I'll take us through the Contraception Atlas, and I'll fly through rather quickly some slides, but because they're a bit technical, but they're more. You can go into more detail by looking at the atlas in front of you. So next slide, please. Okay, so again, so why a contraception atlas? As we learned, it's about 35 point something, almost 36% of all pregnancies in Europe, which are still unintended even today. So these are the most recent figures from WHO. And it's 57% of women in Europe who use a modern form of contraception. Now, this is slightly up by 1% compared to last year, and it's attributable mainly to women, mainly in East European countries, increasing contraceptive use. So this is the state of our continent, but there's great disparities between different countries. Next slide. Okay, so again, what is the atlas? So you have that in front of you, but just a quick reminder is that it covers 46 countries, so that of geographic Europe, broadly speaking, the Council of Europe, and it takes a look at 3 specific areas. So access to supplies, so the actual contraceptives, access to counseling, so a medical professional who will advise a woman about what type of contraception is best suited for her. And then also we took a look at online information, specifically that provided by states, bearing in mind that there's a lot of misinformation and even disinformation circulating out there in the ether about access to contraception. So we felt it was important that governments provide authoritative information. And then these are subdivided into specific sub-criteria, which you find on the back of the atlas. So if you want to really nerd out and look at the details, it's right there for you to do that. And and all of this is guided by a very respected group of experts, and we have at least one of the experts here with us today, and we'll be hearing from him. Next slide, please. But just a quick overview of who these experts are. So you have a broad group of different people who are knowledgeable about contraception from a medical perspective, from a practitioner perspective, from an academic, political perspective, so and a civil society, and also from different subfields within that. So you have there the expert group, and I'd like to thank the expert group for having done very diligent work in taking a look at all the different criteria and working with us over the past 6 years, and specifically this recent group over the past year. Next slide. So why is contraception important? Just as a quick reminder, but already the 2 co-chairs have mentioned it very, very elegantly. So increased use of contraception contributes to fewer unwanted pregnancies or unintended pregnancies. Fewer unintended pregnancies then contributes to having fewer induced abortions. And why is this relevant for us in Europe? Europe is a region that has both the highest contraceptive prevalence rates in the world and among the lowest contraceptive prevalence rates. So in this region, we have both extremes. And while as I'll be showing, overall, there's been progress over the past few years, the progress is not really as much as we would have liked. Next slide. So here's the Contraception Atlas for 2023. So you can see here, if those of you who have seen previous editions, this map tells us quite a number of things. On the one hand, we can see that it looks like there's an increased polarization between East and West Europe. West Europe is almost all green, even dark green, and has been improving in this direction over the past couple of years. I mean, there's been some notable improvements from Ireland, France, Belgium, Luxembourg over the past couple of years. A number of years ago, Germany was not in dark green, now it is. And then on the other side of the continent, unfortunately, the countries have not been progressing towards away from the dark red, red or orange, and they've been staying where they are. So we can see that we really are dealing with a Europe of two speeds at least, if not variable speeds. And unfortunately here, we have two countries at opposite extremes. We have the UK, which is doing the best in Europe this year. And unfortunately, Poland still does the worst in Europe for the third or fourth year running now. And also, I should say, we'll be presenting this atlas in the Polish Parliament just next week with Polish members of Parliament, so that they're aware of what it is that they can do as legislators to improve the situation in this country, so that hopefully one day Poland is no longer in its special category of red all by itself. Next slide. So here's what the different colors mean. So if we take a look at different supplies, we can see that at one end, on the very good side of the spectrum, the very good countries have a wide range of different types of contraceptives that are covered under their national health systems, including at least one type of LARC. That's the acronym that my colleague Leonidas used, LARC standing for long-acting reversible contraception. They also have specific schemes for young people or low-income people. And then you go to the opposite side of that, and then you have the very poor countries which don't offer reimbursement. What this means is that it's often out of pocket, and this creates a financial barrier. And then when you consider that the countries which are red tend to be the countries which lower GNIs with lower incomes, someone with less disposable income is then expected to shell out more money out of their own pocket, then it makes it that much more inaccessible. Next slide. Okay, then in terms of counseling, again, what we see is that the good countries provide for free counseling on family planning in various settings, so that a woman simply sets up a meeting and then can access sound, objective, neutral medical advice about what is the best type of contraception for her at a specific time in her life. On the other hand, you have countries which provide no information, and in some cases, unfortunately, we even have examples of some countries which provide dissuasive information on using contraception. Next slide. And then in terms of online information, this is a rather important one when we consider that contraception is something that, as Sophie mentioned, everyone will have to consider at some point in their life. There needs to be reliable information. Combined with this, the fact that there's a lot of myths, misinformation, and even disinformation, we found it to be very important for governments to provide authoritative information on this. And in fact, this is one area where the good countries have been very much improving over the past few years, so that we have government-supported or government-run websites which provide information with a so-called decision aid, so that a woman plugs in information about what type of contraception she would like. You know, I want something hormones, not non-hormonal. I want something that I don't need to think about, something with or without prescription, something like that. And then she's given a list of different possibilities of what would be the right type of thing for her. On the other hand, then you have governments which are very neglectful in their approaches to this and which provide no information. And you have a number of countries in the middle which provide only, for example, the legal framework for access to contraception, which, you know, in this house, in the European Parliament, you're skilled at reading laws and policies, but not necessarily average citizens will be able to decipher this. So we have this range of public information. Next slide. So if we take a look at our champion this year, United Kingdom, we see that they've been that the UK has been good at expanding a women's health hub to improve access to a full range of contraceptive methods. They've vastly improved the NHS website, and they've also commissioned, or they plan to commission a study on reproductive health experiences, a survey, and this to be done on a regular basis. So here we have an example of a country which is taking a proactive approach in understanding how its own people access contraception and live their reproductive lives and better adapt policies in an ongoing basis. Next slide. Other positive changes. So France, our neighbor, excuse me, emergency contraception now fully covered by the health insurance. And one big thing that was announced by the president is condoms become freely available for young people throughout the country. Ireland, free contraception available for young people, and we'll be hearing about this from our colleague senator from Ireland. Latvia also, there's been some progress there. IUDs, intrauterine devices, are now partially compensated by the state. Next slide. Also, we just wanted to flag a few things. Italy, where this is decentralized to the regions, there's some positive developments at the level of the Lazio region. And then Slovenia also, to show that things are improving in some East European countries, full coverage of hormonal contraception and IUDs, very good governmental website, but there's still some progress to be made in that country. Next slide. Okay, so at the level of European institutions, so at the level of the Council of Europe, we have a report on improving access to sexual reproductive health and rights through innovative approaches done by a colleague of yours, Petra Stinen. That is expected to be adopted very shortly. And then at the level of the European Union, well, there's been the responses from the European Commission to follow-up letters in relation to the report by Fred Matic about asking the Commission what it is that they're doing to follow up on this. The responses were positive, but I think probably more work needs to be done on putting a bit of helpful pressure on our friends at the Commission. Next slide. Now, if we take a look at some negative changes, unfortunately, these are all to the east, and some of them are due to geopolitical situations. So in Armenia, what had been some initial inklings of progress seems to have disappeared, with less information being provided by the government, and vulnerable groups which had benefited from a program no longer benefit from this. Same thing in Macedonia. In Turkey, less consultations consultations are less accessible, and again, government information disappears. And in Ukraine also, programs which had been aimed at vulnerable groups are no longer there. But I think in Ukraine, we all understand the reason why this is happening. It's a very unique situation, and we can only offer our sympathy. Next slide. So if we take a look at the best performing countries, again, we have the same top countries as we have had for the past couple of years. United Kingdom, France, and Belgium. So again, general coverage, contraception is generally covered, including long-acting reversible. Special schemes for young people, vulnerable groups, very accessible and free consultations, and excellent public comprehensive information in these countries. Next slide. The worst performing countries, again, there's not much change from last year, but Poland, unfortunately, remains the worst, and then followed very quickly by Hungary and Bosnia-Herzegovina. no coverage in national health systems, no special systems for vulnerable or young people, consultations are not or insufficiently covered, and there's almost no, if not, there's no public information about this issue. Next slide. So here we'll take a look at what has changed over the 6-year history of the of this policy atlas. So again, just out of the 46 countries we've looked at, good news is that 26 of them have improved, okay, over this period. 9 did not change, and 11 have declined, declined, or we've had to downgrade them based on additional information that we were able to obtain. Next slide. So if we take a look at here, these are the countries that have improved their, in terms of policies since 2017. So you can see this is the a big part of Europe, okay? But again, if you take out Russian Federation and Belarus and Ukraine, where the improvements were very, very tiny, and in some cases ephemeral, most of the changes have all taken place in Western Europe. Next slide. The countries which have stagnated, nothing really has changed. There it looks like we have a number of countries in the middle of the continent. And then next slide. The countries which have declined, decreased over the past couple of years, and we can see a lot of them are in Eastern Europe, and we can see that in a number of cases, probably this is attributable to different political reasons that the situation has deteriorated. Next slide. So maybe it's just some, I'll end soon on key findings. For 2023, it is 43% of countries which cover contraceptives in their national health systems, including some form of long-acting reversible contraception. It's 14 countries, 30%, which cover contraceptives in their NHS for young people. Almost all countries, 89%, cover counseling in their national health systems. And it's 19 countries, only 14%, that provide good governmental websites. Next slide. So overall, we can see how this looks like in a more detailed fashion. So we can see that France and the UK, which were already doing well, have gone further up. Ireland joins the club of countries that are doing very well, and so does Slovenia. Poland remains an outlier all by itself, and then you have a whole category of red countries, not the dark red, which remain in red. And unfortunately, when I take a look at this map, and you can see it for yourself, a number of countries which were already red have further decreased, such as Greece, North Macedonia, Slovakia, Armenia, Turkey, Cyprus, Hungary, Bosnia. Next slide. So overall, we can see, as I mentioned at the very beginning, that there's increasing polarization between East and Western Europe. In Western Europe, more and more countries are expanding free access to contraception for young people, and usually this is accompanied by including long-acting reversible contraception. A number of countries are starting to offer emergency contraception for free, and there's positive developments in the pipelines that we're hearing about in a number of different countries. So Luxembourg, we were hoping it would happen this year, but it looks like it will come into effect in the next couple of months. Spain and Finland, maybe Azerbaijan as well, that would be nice. In Eastern Europe, we see that what had been pilot schemes aimed at vulnerable or young people, which existed a couple of years ago, have been stopped. And we see that that governments are not living up to their responsibility to provide information. Next slide. Then in terms of information trends, governmental and NGO websites have been vastly improved so that the quality of information in many countries has increased dramatically. What this means is that the competition has gotten stiffer. And so what we've had to do is downgrade some countries which previously had been ranked as having good information to only having medium or adequate information. Unfortunately, we had to do this for Portugal this past year, where the website remained the same, but the competition got stiffer. As was mentioned here. Next slide. And then in terms of recommendations, and this is the end of it, coverage of contraceptives within national health systems, including long-acting reversible contraception, ensuring accessible counseling to contraception, and then taking a look specifically at how this is accessible to people. So overcoming rural or geographic distances or hard-to-reach areas or specific populations. And then finally, again, public health institutions, governments need to provide information and adequate, authoritative, neutral information. So I'll end here, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. That was extremely interesting. Fortunately, there is some good news, but we also see some worrying developments. And if you look at the map, not just in terms of the number of countries, but also population size, then it changes again, because some of the, let's say, the red countries are some of the biggest countries. So, and I also see a few green and dark green gems here in the middle of the red and orange. I see Moldova, Slovenia, Estonia, Albania doing very well. So I think they also deserve praise for being surrounded by red and orange territory and still being champions for health equality. And I would, before introducing the panelists, maybe ask Fred if we can have a chat afterwards and see if we can call for a parliamentary debate, a plenary debate on this form of health inequality, because that is the topic. It's about inequality, not just about contraception. And we know that the group leaders will then go a bit like, oh God, do we really have to? But we can push it a bit. So I'm going to introduce the speakers on the podium. We actually only have very little time left, so I suggest that we overrun a little bit of the meeting time and eat a little bit into the party time. I'm sorry about that, but work comes first before play, and I think this is very important. I'm very quickly going to introduce Senator Pauline O'Reilly from the Green Party, spokesperson for education and higher education in Ireland. You're most welcome. You were one of the driving forces behind the improvement and introduction of new measures in Ireland. Then we have with us Mr. Jan Greguš. I hope. Right. Okay. Oof. From the Czech Republic, from Masaryk University, and he's a member of the Gynecological and Obstetrical Society. And you have also been contributing to the project, and then last but not least, and also a contributor to the project, Mrs. Kratunkova, who's the advocacy officer of Médecins du Monde from Bulgaria. So I'm going to ask you to each do a very short introduction. Maybe you can give it to 4 or 5 minutes, and then we'll have some minutes left for a few questions. Senator O'Reilly.
Sure. Thank you so much to everyone for attending. It's great to see so many people here. I suppose what strikes me is that we often talk about access to contraception as a public health measure, and indeed it is. But I think when you look at the Atlas, you can see quite clearly that it links very, very closely with politics, with human rights, with what's going on in a country at a particular time. And so that's really, I suppose, the story of Ireland. In the past, when people thought about Ireland, they thought of a very conservative Catholic country. It was called the land of saints and scholars because, yes, we have a lot of academia, but we also had a lot of religiosity, real links with the Vatican. And it was a place that was anti-abortion, anti-contraception, anti-same-sex marriage, and a place that was uncomfortable and oppressive for women to live and to access healthcare. And that has shifted in a really dramatic way in quite a short space of time. I am honoured to be part of that. But, you know, the push has come from NGOs, it's come from advocates in Ireland, like, for instance, the Irish Family Planning Association and others, the National Women's Council, over many decades, but most recently in 2011, Ireland actually removed its ambassador from the Vatican. There was a lot of anger around institutional abuse, the failure of the Catholic Church to step up, and it had all but destroyed a lot of Ireland and a lot of families across Ireland. After that, we had a same-sex marriage referendum in 2015, which passed by a large majority, took a lot of people by surprise, even though there was that conservative element that was campaigning against it. It really showed that it wasn't actually, it didn't have the numbers behind it that people had thought. 2018, many of us campaigned to have abortion legalised in Ireland, and we were successful, again, quite dramatically successful. And one of the recommendations around that was access to contraception. And we've seen in the UK that they provided that along with access to abortion. And so, there are countries where terminations go down because of this access, and that's what we really wanted to replicate in Ireland. I am the chairperson of the Green Party in Ireland, and when we entered negotiations to form a government in 2020, women's healthcare and particularly access to contraception was high on our agenda. And so we put in a stipulation to the programme for government that we would bring our government partners with us, and they are with us, even though we don't align on everything, on providing an incremental access for everyone to contraception. And there have been various reports, but I would just point to one in 2020, in fact, when we entered government, that showed that 51% of women in Ireland aged 17 to 45 had sexual intercourse without using contraception. Like 51% is massive. Now, you could argue maybe some want to get pregnant, but I would argue that the majority of sexual intercourse, occasions, you're not looking to get pregnant. So there was a huge problem there. Now, it was argued that most people had access because we do have a medical card system. We don't have free access for everyone to medical care, but most people do. A lot of people do have access to a medical card, but people weren't using it for contraception. You also, you couldn't use it to the same extent for LARCs, for instance, for advice around what might suit you at a particular stage in your life. So what we now have is, it's not just free access, but it's also access to information, to consultation about what might work for you. We have 2,500 general practitioner doctors signed up to providing this, and about 1,500 pharmacies. So, even still, we still had, well, what about men? Because we started it with women, and condoms aren't that expensive for one thing. They're not that well used for another, and we had provided free condoms through a lot of colleges, which again was very hard fought for. So look, I think that what has really led to this rise, which is a dramatic rise, I'm delighted to see we're on the leaderboard now, is, I think, the social change. It is political pressure. It is, forming a government. But there is a lot more work left to do. And those, I suppose, from more disadvantaged background, we do need to make sure that they are the ones who are really having access. And there are organisations like Akidwa who will really reach out, I suppose, to migrant women in the community. And that has been a key part of what we've tried to do in Ireland. So this year, last year we had it from age 17 to 25. January, it's increased to age 26, and this September it increases to age 30, and that's just the start of the rollout to everyone. We also have in the budget that it will include those who are 16, but there are some governance issues around 16-year-olds that we're trying to deal with at the moment. And I'm conscious of my time, but I just wanted to also say that we're due to have a review of the abortion legislation to widen the parameters. That review is due to be published this week. We in the Green Party are very much pushing the Minister for Health to publish this report, and indeed I was on to him this morning, because a lot of us are waiting with bated breath to see, can we increase it to those who are, who have later term abortions? Because at the moment, people are still leaving to go to the UK in Ireland with those later term abortions. So a lot done, a lot more to do. Delighted to have been part of it, delighted to be here today. But I do think politics is key. It's not just about producing the facts. It's also about saying, how can we push a movement, a human rights movement, that is not just led by women, but is, women's health and women's rights are at the forefront. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think congratulations to everything you've achieved and to Ireland. And I think one of the most remarkable things in Ireland with both the referenda is that it was very much the people taking the lead, whereas some political parties were indeed making politics over other people's lives. And we only need to say Roe versus Wade to know that it's politics. Dr. Gregos, you have the floor for 45 minutes.
Okay. So thank you very much for the opportunity to come here and talk to this noble audience. Ladies and gentlemen, instead of talking about the situation in my country, the Czech Republic, where the contraceptive situation is quite stable, without ups or downs, I want to say a few more general notions. Access to modern contraception is a human right. It can be undermined, and it is, by financial and economic barriers. Here, reimbursement and coverage of contraception within national healthcare systems is the best solution. But it can be also undermined in a more subtle, more cunning way. It can be undermined by the spread of prejudices, misinformation, and lies about contraception. My patients often come to me, to my clinic, asking for counseling on contraception. And they're often like, I want a pill, doc, but without hormones. Why? Because I do not want to die of cancer, and so on and so on. And it usually takes a lot of time to talk through these prejudices and misinformation and to correct the women's views regarding contraception. Another question here is who and why is spreading these prejudices and misinformations, whether it's the anti-choice forces that the EPF has described so well, or if there are some other players operating in the shadows. By the way, these forces also quite frequently oppose abortion, but if they also oppose contraception, it is the most unwise thing to do, because modern contraception is the abortion's best prevention we have. So, nevertheless, get to be more general again. What I see that we have here is a clash of information against misinformation. It is a clash of evidence-based medicine against non-scientific prejudices and lies. So when we are trying to fight for access to modern contraception as a human right, we must, alongside fighting economic and financial barriers, also fight informational barriers. Otherwise, we can end up in a hypothetical situation when all national healthcare systems cover contraception in all European countries with no women actually using it, which would, of course, bring a dramatic increase in abortion rates and unintended and unwanted pregnancies. So that's why, from my point of view as a clinician, I think that fighting these misinformation and lies is our utmost goal. Thank you.
Indeed, very, very true. It's actually remarkable that, let's say, some governments of EU countries which are in the forefront of, calling for measures against disinformation from Russia, for example, are the same governments who are actually spreading disinformation about sexual and reproductive health and rights. Just saying, we don't need to mention who they are, but they're not green. Okay, last but not least, Mrs. Katungova, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you very much. I will just present briefly the case in Bulgaria. In Bulgaria, we have actually everything is legal, but everything is dependent on the financial position, the financial situation of people, which kind of creates a lot of inequality, and it reproduces the already pre-existing inequalities in the country. For those of you that don't know, Bulgaria has the highest income inequality in the EU. So we see that the situation is not very much different on the field of access to sexual and reproductive rights. The situation of young people is also similar because they also don't have any income because they're still students. So they don't have any access, but they also don't have any access to consultation because they need the consent of the parents. There is also not enough education on health and sexuality at school. It's mainly in the biology classes based on the human anatomy, and it's taught by the teachers themselves. So there is not enough information for the younger generation, which I think is also a little bit hypocritical, and it's irresponsible for this future generation. So they don't have any information about consent, about sexuality, about prevention of sexually transmitted diseases. And the only information that they receive is on some vague websites on the internet. Just to kind of situate that if you don't have access to contraception, well, of course, people can get pregnant with unintended pregnancies, but abortion is also paid. And sometimes it can cost as much as half the minimum wage, which is a huge cost, especially for poorer people. And this kind of also puts younger people again in a vulnerable position because they also need the consent of the parents to perform abortion. And this is also in a time when abortion is kind of, although we're talking about contraception, but abortion is still kind of attacked on a European level, and we see that it's more and more a problem in Italy and Romania. And in this context, Médecins du Monde is trying to work all over the globe on access to sexual and reproductive health. And in Bulgaria, we've been working since 2004, trying to reinforce the local stakeholders by introducing sustainable programs for access to contraception and to services. We work in one neighborhood in a medium-sized town, which is a neighborhood that concentrates a lot of poverty. So people don't have even 25 euros to go to a gynecologist and to pay for an IUD, for example. So what we do is actually provide access to uninsured women, to contraception, and to a gynecological consultation. And we see that it's quite demanded by the vulnerable population. What we do as well is we're trying to provide access to a neutral, reliable information of good quality. And we started working because in Bulgaria, we don't have a governmental website. So all the information is on some private or public fragmented websites. And what we're trying to do with the support of EPF is to create a website that can be overtaken by the Ministry of Health, which will kind of comprise a lot of information in an easy to understand language. And there have been already talks with some MPs. It is possible to happen. We just need to make the website, but I think it's on good bon voie. It's on good direction. And what we're kind of fighting for in Bulgaria, this is actually the website. I don't know if you see the screen. What we're kind of working on is trying to push for the adoption of a national program on sexual and reproductive health, which will provide free access to contraception, to abortion, to prevention of unintended pregnancies, of sexually transmitted diseases, of cervical cancer, etc. And this has to be regardless of the financial position and situation of anybody. And if there is any political party so far that has ever talked about sexual and reproductive, such a program, it has been the far right. And this is a problem because they kind of co-opt the topic and they present it through a racist lens, which is very, very dangerous. So I think that the civil society and other MPs and other political parties need to take over also the topic and not leave it to the far right, because this can be very, very dangerous, I believe. And I just, one small comment on some of the previous things that were said. It is a political issue. We see that the Atlas, it's divided, it's very clear divide between East and West, but I think that we cannot understand the topic in this divide if we don't look at the demographic situation. Because it is a political issue, but it's also a demographic issue, because in the East, the population is diminishing, and it's very difficult to talk about access to contraception and reproductive health when you're when you're a country with the fastest shrinking population, which is the case in Bulgaria, according to the UN. So it's very important how we frame the issue. And I think that just framing it as a human rights issue is not going to work in our case. We need to present it as something else. And for example, at least I try to give the example of France, where although everything is, it's kind of covered, you have better access, the population is not diminishing. On the contrary, it's increasing. So there is no connection between the access to sexual and reproductive health and diminishing of the population. But so this is very important, just a point to understand the East, I think. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. And I entirely agree that demographics is never an argument, because indeed, Bulgaria, I believe, in the last 30 years has lost about 1/3 of its population because of emigration. So the solution to that is not removing choice from women. The solution to that is making Bulgaria a more attractive place to live by good governance and ending corruption, for example. That would be a better solution to demographic decline than stripping women of their choice. Sorry to be a bit tough, but and I think this applies to many countries. Okay, we have like 3 minutes left. We're going to stretch it a little bit. I'll take 2 to 3 questions. You can put them to the panel. And then after that, we're going to wrap up. I see one question in the back, one in the middle, a last one, and the gentleman over here. Okay, that's it. The first the gentleman in the back, then the lady in black in the middle. Did I ask you anything? No. And then the gentleman over there, please.
Maybe we should start with the lady, and then I go later. I don't know. Okay. I start. First, I have a comment, and I see that the panel is gender equal, but then I see that the audience is not so gender equal. So my first comment is why this subject is so interesting, mainly for female and women, and male and men are not so interested on this subject. And I think this is a layer which goes beyond, how a country is addressing this issue or not. It's a cultural issue also. But the real question is about what you think is also the impact of migration of families and people coming from outside of European Union. So how this map, this kind of statistics can be affected by this phenomenon. Thanks.
Thank you. The lady in the middle. Yes, please.
Hi, thank you. I have 2 questions. One would be, what do you consider to be modern contraception? Because I think, personally, I would say it's not modern enough, most options that we have. The second question would be, do you take into account, when looking at the progress of different countries, the balance of responsibility between genders? So I've heard the word her be mentioned a lot in this discussion, and I was wondering, okay, what about him? Where's the responsibility of men when it comes to contraception? Thank you.
In that respect, I thought the 51% who thought that the male condom was the most used was an interesting insight into what people think and what reality is. The gentleman over here.
I have 2 quick questions. The first one is, who did you ask when this information that we have, do they come from governmental agencies? Because I'm the Vice President of European Society of Conception. With EBCOG, we have, in 2022, have done a survey of the leads in the countries. We're working on the analysis of the data. So it'll be interesting to see where you got that information. I think that was my first question. The second one was, if you look at I come from the UK, if you look at the UK sort of innovation in the sense of sexual reproductive health, in one of the slides, it includes things like menstrual health, menopause, cancer prevention, because for women and men who are partners of women, these areas actually impact on sexual and reproductive health, but they also impact on the use of contraception. A woman who has very severe, heavy menstrual bleeding is less likely to be very consistent user of contraception and is less likely to be more sort of fulfilled and happy from a sexual point of view. And I wonder whether that should be included in the future surveys that you do.
Okay. One last question.
Yes,
Gwendoline Delvaux.
Mr. Data, could you elaborate on how come you are going to speak to the Polish Parliament? Did they invite you? How this, and does it happen in other countries? Do you go to other parliaments? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Then I'm going to take the answers in the inverse order, so from my left to my right. No, as you wish. Neil?
Okay, thank you. I'll answer the easiest one from our colleague MEP here. So yes, we do present it in different national parliaments. In Poland, we're presenting it next week upon the invitation of, I will mispronounce the name, but Joanna Schöring-Wilgus, who is a member of parliament in Poland. And in Poland, there is a cross-party parliamentary group working on women's health issues, and so they are hosting this event. And we will also be presenting it next week in Austria with members of parliament from the Austrian National Assembly, and we're open to presenting it in every country that's interested to raise awareness about this issue. So if anyone is interested, please contact us, and we can discuss making such a presentation and discuss dates. So that's one. Next, in terms of the other questions, the sources of information from the gentleman from the UK, from EPCO, the sources of information are a diverse range of different information, but all are open source and publicly available, etc. So that, for example, in terms of the websites, we take a look at websites, and if we can find one or not, then we take a look at the actual policies in place in different countries. The policies in each country are written for that country and are not necessarily meant to be compared with others. So we have to go in there and trying to understand the overall health system and how does that work. And for this, we always consult with national organizations, national civil society organizations. If I may, you'll see on the back of the atlas, there are a whole range of little logos at the bottom there. Okay, these are the different national civil society organizations we have consulted with in different countries. The vast majority of them are member associations of the International Planned Parenthood Federation. So these would be the expert organizations on family planning, contraception in their respective countries. Some of them are different organizations, but we have the data for each country, and then we share it with those different organizations, and they help us correct it, massage it, or contextualize it and interpret it in a way which is appropriate and comparable. So that's how we handle and process the data. The question in relation to modern contraception from the woman in black, there we use the definition of the WHO. So it's of the World Health Organization. So they have identified what is modern contraception, and we use that. Although you are correct in wondering whether this is a definition that's applicable to the whole world. Okay, so it may be that in different contexts, modern is something else than what it would be at a global level. And then finally, I would just, in terms of the question on migration from outside of the EU, that's a separate phenomenon. Here we take a look at policies, but I would say that we try to cover this indirectly. For example, in terms of what information do governments provide to the people on their territories, and also in what languages, so that if you have a large population from a specific country, then that suggests that the government should try to reach out to that population in that population's native language, so that they can be incorporated and integrated into the health system. So, thank you.
Okay, Dr. Gregos?
Yeah, I just want to... Yeah, sorry. I just want to add to this question about modern contraception that, I would just put the link between modern and highly efficient contraception. And by this, obviously, it would be LARC, long-acting reversible contraception, which are implants and intrauterine systems and devices. Also, it would be sterilization. It would be female, but also male sterilization. I want to just stress this out because, as you said, that contraception is not only a women's thing; it's also a man's thing. And I just want to say it clearly that vasectomy, which is male sterilization, is one of the highest, most efficient method of contraception, but it's rarely used or mentioned. Or I mean that there are countries like the UK or the US where the percentage of men who are undergoing this procedure is increasing, which is, I think, the good way. But for example, in my country, the Czech Republic, it's still very stigmatizing. So I realized that this is something that we need to work on to promote vasectomies as a very efficient method of contraception with little or no effect on sexual life of men. Yeah. And apart from this, of course, we can mention, the combined oral contraception and so on. But I think this is something that we are all aware of. But I would just especially mention these vasectomies. Yeah.
Maybe men would be more enthusiastic about vasectomies if they had to undergo pregnancy as well. Senator O'Reilly.
Some very interesting points raised there. I think, firstly, just to say about the number of men, actually, there's more men here than would be in a normal meeting that I would attend in relation to reproduction or contraception. And I'm Vice Chair of the Gender Equality Committee in our Parliament, and it was difficult to get men parliamentarians to put themselves forward. And actually, because there are fewer female parliamentarians, they end up having to do an awful lot more work because they try to go on all of these committees to represent women. And then when it comes to the committees that actually are about women's rights, you find that the men not putting themselves forward. So, look, I think that there's a lot of cultural work to do, but my experience is that when things don't impact on your own human rights, you're less likely to see them as an issue and something to fight hard for. I think that the education system really comes into place here, and something that I didn't touch on. So still in Ireland, kind of education system is seen as the last stronghold of the Catholic Church. 90% of our schools are Catholic, even though they're state funded. So that's an area that needs huge change. In relation then to whose responsibility is it, well, we haven't done that well when men were left to be responsible. And I think that it's really about ensuring that women have more control over their own bodies. And that's what I would see a lot of this, the importance of a lot of this. And actually, the expensive forms of contraception are those that are the ones that women will want to access. And it's not just, I think the gentleman here raised the issue of menstrual health as well. It's not just about pregnancy and stopping pregnancy. It's also about our menstrual health. The types of contraception change as you get older. In menopause, the coil is really helpful, for instance, when it comes to dealing with menopause and with perimenopause. So all of that is about actually putting some more of the control into women's hands. And I don't really want to leave it up to men anymore. And I think it particularly impacts on those who are from economically disadvantaged backgrounds, but also those who are young and don't want to ask their parents for money to get the pill or to get an implant. And crucially, again, an issue that I think is really important and linked with this is those who are in domestic violence situations. And we are one of the first countries in Europe to bring in paid leave for domestic violence, and that legislation has passed now, so people can get 5 days paid leave for domestic violence. But I do think that all of these things link together and all have to be advanced together to see that shift that we need in society in order that men do step up to the mark.
Thank you very much. Well, one man who stepped up to the mark is Fred here, and I was singing his praise at the start, not just because objectively you have delivered a historic report, but because, and I'm not kidding at all. I mean, you are a role model. It's extremely important that somebody like you is the voice for sexual and reproductive health and rights. It's really important, and I'm very grateful for all the work that you've done, and not just you've not just done it superficially. You're really throwing yourself into it, and I think we owe you gratitude. Thank you very much. I will give you the microphone for the closing remarks.
Thank you, Sophie. Thank you for your great moderating this event. And thanks to all of the experts and colleagues who presented the Atlas and participated in discussions. We heard many relevant and interesting things today, and I have to say that some of the things have surprised me. Aside from the usually well-ranked countries like Belgium and France, I'm glad to see other countries are improving their access to contraception and making progress in this area. I have to mention my member state, Croatia, who firmly stands below 50%, and this is disappointing. For me, it is shocking that even Ukraine, for example, who is in the war, manages to have a better score than the newest EU member state. That is a gap we need to work on clearly, and I will continue to push them bilaterally to implement changes without delay. I especially appreciate the focus of the websites and online information, as we are living in a fully digital age, and this will be crucial also in the upcoming years. I see the possibility here to make an impact through ensuring that this information online is indeed evidence and science-based. This is also a way of countering the anti-gender agenda which is providing false and harmful information. Our main messages remains the same. Access to contraception is a basic human right, and it is the responsibility of member states and institutions to guarantee it to all without discrimination. I want to thank the team behind this Atlas again. I know this is a huge workload, and be sure that we will use this and base it on advocate and fight for adequate policies in this area. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all very much. Thank you, Fred. Thank you to the panel. Thank you, Neil, for the Atlas every year again. And thanks to everybody who's here in the room. Until 2 o'clock, you can still grab a snack or drinks and have a chat. And we're looking forward to next year. And then we hope for a lot more green. Thank you all very much.